Argylle is now out playing in theaters. Alright, so let's just address this right off the bat. If you've been watching the trailers, if you've even just seen the poster, you probably think that this is a Henry Cavill action movie coming off of him being let go as Superman. And let me just tell you, it's not. This is not what this movie is. Henry Cavill is probably in about 5% of this movie, so while he's at the front of the poster, he's nowhere near the lead of this movie. That goes to the people standing a couple rows in the back. Because if you're not sure what Argylle is about this author played by Bryce Dallas Howard. She writes spy novels. Turns out her spy novels predict the future. Now there are real spies in the world that want to get a hold of her and the books that live inside her head to find out what's going to happen next. And one of those spies is played by Sam Rockwell. Now, the majority of this movie is Sam Rockwell and Bryce Dallas Howard teamed up together as he is trying to get her to help him with his spy mission. And one of the strong things that Argylle has going for it is Sam Rockwell, Bryce Dallas Howard, and the rest of this incredible cast. You've got Bryan Cranston in there as the bad guy, Catherine O'Hara's in here, Samuel L. Jackson's in here, and they're all so much fun. You can tell they're all just having a delight with this material, with this story, and they deliver some really fun performances. On top of that, the action sequences are actually pretty well done. Some of them are a little bit choppy in the editing, but I always found them to be quite energetic, quite fun, quite creative, I must say. There's an action sequence in this movie that involves oil. That's all I'll give away, is that there's oil in this action sequence. And it was one of the weirdest, bizarre, most bonkers thing I've ever seen in a movie theater. And the whole sequence, I was just like, this is completely ridiculous, but I kind of love it. And honestly, that's how I would describe Argylle. This movie is completely and utterly ridiculous, but I kind of loved it. And that's something that you have to know going into Argylle. I mean, if you're not on board with this movie in the first 5 minutes, which involves Henry Cavill's character driving a car down the streets of Greece, which make the car chase sequences in Fast 10 feel as grounded as the sequences in Speed. If you're not on board, by the time that happens, this movie's not going to work for you, because the whole movie is just this over-the-top, completely ridiculous, exaggerated reality. And in that way, this movie is completely ridiculous, it is silly, and I can see why for that reason some of this won't work for people. For me, it worked pretty well. I had a blast in this world. I had so much fun with these sequences. Some of these action sequences were honestly some of the most creative and most original action sequences I've seen in a movie in a very long time. There are scenes in this movie that I'm not going to forget because I've just never seen them done before. But when you boil it down to the story, how is the story? Here's the thing about the story of Argylle. I am both a fan of it, and I also think there are some points of the story that are kind of generic and a little bit predictable. Because one of the things that it's clear that Matthew Vaughn is trying to do with Argylle is he's trying to keep you on your toes consistently throughout the movie. There is twist after twist after twist after twist. I think there's 5 twists in this movie, and I will admit, 3 of them really worked for me, and then there was 2 twists in there that I was kind of saw that coming, didn't really need it. But those other 3 twists that happen, they're definitely make or break moments of the movie, because when the twists happen, they change how you view the story and how the movie is progressing. And in that way, the movie can almost feel like it shifts various narratives very quickly. At one point, you're following one storyline, then this twist happens, it completely alters how you view the story up until that point, and then you feel like you're on a completely different storyline, and then another twist happens, and it feels like everything before it is just negated, and we're on a different narrative. But for me, the way that the story kept shifting, it all related back to each other. I didn't feel like one shift completely broke the reality or the narrative of what had come before it. To the point that when these twists started to happen so frequently, I was able to get on board with each one, because to me, it felt like it fit the world and the reality that the world had set up in that story. But I also understand why that might not work for everybody, because these twists are very outlandish. These twists are very ambitious in what they are trying to get the audience to accept in their reality of the story. And obviously this is non-spoiler review, so I can't even tell you what the twists are, so everything is kept completely vague. But what I will say is that for me, most of the twists worked. Now, that's not to say that the movie has a consistent, smooth flowing narrative going throughout its 2-hour and 20-minute runtime. Because the movie does have a lot of characters, and there's a lot of cuts in the editing where we go to various locations and various people, And sometimes I do feel like Matthew Vaughn didn't quite know how to balance all the characters and all the elements of this story. Like going back to Henry Cavill for an example, the way that Henry Cavill pops up in this movie, and I will just use the term pops up because he's not really a character in this movie. He just kind of appears here and there. Again, he's in like 5% of the movie. But when he starts popping up near the second and third acts of the film, I was kind of like, you don't really need him anymore. He's not that essential to what's happening in the story. Also, this might be 2024's The Flash because this movie has a $200 million budget and there are some pretty shoddy CGI effects. Now, for the most part, I would say that the CGI fit in the environment and the world that this movie was establishing because it did add a little bit of a cartoony feel to this already over-the-top exaggerated world. But then there were just some CGI effects where it was like, that just doesn't look good. Like, that just looks like a digital person. That just looks like a digital automobile. That just looks like a green screen that the characters are standing in front of. I would say there were a couple times where the CGI in the movie did pull me out of the movie. But in the end, I don't know if it's because January was just such a crap show. There was like nothing good that I watched in January. For going out on a Friday night, just catching a movie with my wife and watching Argylle, I enjoyed myself. I had a good time in the theater. I don't think it's going to end up in like my top 10 favorites of the year or anything by the end of the year. But as far as an enjoyable time at the theater, I thought I had a great cast, some fun characters, some fun performances, some exciting action, and some twists that really did keep the story engaged for me from beginning to end. You're just going to have to see it for yourself, whether it's going to work for you or not. But for me, it worked for me. I enjoyed it. And if you're asking me if you should go out and see it, I'm going to give it a recommend. I think it's worth the time. Anyway, guys, those are all my thoughts and opinions on Argylle. But what did you guys think of Argylle? Have you had a chance to check it out yet? Comment down below and let me know. And if you're new here and you haven't heard, we have a goal on this channel. We want to hit 4,000 subscribers before the end of the year. If you like talking about movies, Argylle, Matthew Vaughn films, or just movies in general, consider joining our little community. We'd love to have you. Hit that subscribe button before you make your way out. As always, guys, thank you so much for hearing me out, and I hope to talk to you guys again real soon.